Thank you. So starting the recording, you know, a couple of minutes into this. In the spring, with the changing landscape of school and trying to answer this question about how we do grading and do no harm, we decided it was the perfect time to do a text-based study to really dig deep into this question of how do we grade with equity. And so in June, about 80 teachers participated in a 4-session series where we looked essentially at the first half of the book, which was about the history of grading and the concepts and some of the big ideas. Then in July, we split into smaller groups with many folks choosing to study on their own. And we studied the second half of the book, which described 3 pillars of grading equity. And that's accuracy, bias, and motivation. And within those pillars were practices, descriptions of practices. This is what this pillar really means, and here's practices for how you achieve it. So what we asked folks to do during their study was to choose a pillar, first of all, because it's way too much to try to do everything at once, and we wanted to look for something we could really dig into and commit to. And we asked people to make statements about what they were willing to commit to in their classroom for the coming year. And we asked them to think about and to identify what kinds of supports do you need in order for this kind of change for grading equity to become systemic? And that was a huge question. How do we change? How do we make a meaningful change and help it become systemic? So that's where we are right now. We've got that. We have all these teachers who are committed to making a change, and they have some really specific commitments to something they're going to do to make sure that their grading practices are more equitable. And we want to have this discussion with the commissioner's innovation team and leadership to think about systemic changes, systemic supports, what we can do to support students and teachers as they make these efforts to grade more equitably. So I'm going to pause there to see if anyone thinks I need that there needs to be clarification or any questions. Okay, so far hearing none. Oh, I swear I had this open. So I thought that I would, one of the things that we worked on was a video statement. And this video statement allowed everybody to declare what it is exactly that they are willing to commit to. And I'd love to play that right now because I shared it with the leadership team and I shared the wrong link.
Okay, so while you're pulling that up, Stephanie Hendricks, unmute for a second, say hello. Stephanie put the video together for us. Stephanie, you're up in Bangor, right?
Yeah, but I couldn't have done it without all the people who made those pledges and put the videos together. It was a lot of fun, and I think a lot of times in this profession, we feel very isolated in our own classrooms, and being able to come together as professionals across the state and know that we're in this together and that we're not alone, I think was probably the most powerful outcome of this experience. But I hope you enjoy the video too.
Well said, Stephanie. Well said. Are you getting the video, Morgan, or do you need someone else to try to do it?
So I had it all queued up and then I didn't. Okay, so here we go. I'm not used to playing videos, so if you'd remind me when I play this video, what's the, hold on, I need to share my screen, right?
Yes.
So let me do that. And then I have to hit another button when I share my screen. All right, so I feel like there's one more button I'm supposed to hit in order to
play.
Just hit play?
Yes.
Can you hear it?
Yep. And hit the little guy in the right corner, that's the little square.
I'm Morgan, and I am pleased to announce that the revolution has begun. Teachers across the state of Maine are rethinking their grading practices and policies to improve accuracy, eliminate bias, and increase engagement for all students.
Hi, I'm Ellen. I am a high school English and career prep teacher. This fall, I intend to change my classroom grading practices to a 0 to 4 point scale so that my grading is more accurate and has student success in mind.
My name is Kate, and I teach at Skowhegan Area Middle School. And this year, I'm going to stop using zeros because they make a grade mathematically inaccurate.
This is Amanda Guy, Lewiston High School, grade 10 and 11 English. And my focus is going to be to put more weight on the work that is done less, so put more weight on the latest work, which is especially important.
Hi, I'm Bree Allard, and I teach high school English. This year, I'm going to be more accurate in my grading by avoiding giving zeros for missing work. Instead, I'm going to provide more written feedback so students know what they need to do to improve or what they already have done successfully with the standards.
I'm Terry, and I teach English 11. This year, I will use minimum grading because it will create a mathematically fair grading scale and because it will motivate struggling students to see a realistic pathway to success.
Hi, my name is Lauren, and I teach 6th grade ELA. This year, I'm not grading my students on their efforts. My students are 11 years old and affected by factors outside of my classroom. So if I grade their efforts, I'm inevitably punishing the ones who have the least support, the fewest resources, and the lowest self-confidence.
Hi, I'm Melanie, and I teach ELA and social studies in 7th grade. And this year, I am not going to take off points from student work that is turned in late. It is not a true reflection of the work turned in.
Hi, I'm Stephanie, and I teach high school language arts and humanities. And this year, to make my grading more bias resistant, I am going to focus on content rather than compliance by excluding extra credit, by not deducting points for late work, and by not grading subjective criteria like participation and effort. My students' grades should reflect what they know, as opposed to reflecting things that are out of their control.
Hi, I'm Courtney McCann, and I teach English at Marshwood High School in South Berwick. This year, I'm going to change the way I grade using rubrics because merely meeting the standard should never result in an F.
My name is Kim, and I teach English. And this year, I'm going to practice minimum grading in my classroom because it creates a culture of compassion and hope in the classroom and supports the development of a growth mindset.
Hello, I'm Erin, and I teach high school English. This year, I'm going to focus on labeling assignments with skills and standards and providing written feedback just on that skill or standard. This will put an emphasis on transparency and learning and not on the end point of a numeric grade.
Hi, my name is Amy. I teach high school English, and this year I'm going to use a 0 to 4 grading system because it helps students focus on their skills rather than just on points.
Hello, my name is Todd McKinley, and I teach 8th grade, mostly English and social studies. This year, I plan to develop student trackers where students can make goals and reflect on their progress with their habits at work. I want my students to value persistence as part of their learning.
Hi, I'm Natalie. I'm a high school English teacher. This year, I'm adopting a portfolio system for end of semester assessments and eliminating daily homework, as well as late penalties for that homework, which won't exist anymore. Because I don't want to limit students' ability to show me in any way on any timeline what they know.
My name is Ruth, and I teach 6th grade language arts. I've made a commitment to myself this year to have equity in my grading, which means for the students in my classroom to be motivated and to have success, they have to have more opportunities for redemption, which means that I will have mandatory redos and retakes for all students.
This will not only allow my students to know that A, I care about them, and B, I will not allow them to fail because they are avoiding their learning. This will allow my students the opportunity to focus on the skills that they have not mastered yet in more manageable pieces. Students will then learn from their mistakes and increase their confidence and understanding, allowing them to demonstrate to their full potential.
Hi, my name is Patty Forster. I teach high school English, and this year I'm going to focus on feedback, not points, because I want to help my learners be motivated to learn from both their successes and their failures, to move their learning forward and know what they need to do that, versus feeling judged whether they were good enough or not based on points and grades.
I'm Renee, and I teach high school English. After the Grading for Equity book group, my intention for the fall is to focus individual assignments on specific skills to provide students more consistently with feedback on those skills for each assignment along the way, formatively, and then for the summative assessment in the gradebook to directly connect to the standard and the skill that we've been working on.
Hello, my name is May Applegate. This next year, I will be transitioning to an administrative position at Harpswell Coastal Academy. This year, I hope to help my teachers focus on goal setting and reflection with their advisory students. It is my hope that this practice will help create equity, help encourage students to refocus their idea of grades and achievement in school away from competition and towards personal growth and development.
Hi, I'm Angela. I'm going to allow my students retakes and redos so that they can develop a growth mindset and understand that always, at any point, success is possible. I want my students to have hope.
My name is Crystal Anazuski, and I teach English at Winthrop High School. The entire Winthrop High School English department and I have been happy to be a part of this professional journey, led by our awesome team captain, Morgan Dutton. Last year in my classroom, I implemented one-point rubrics to help give students clear, timely, and consistent feedback. This year, I will continue using those, and I will also be exploring a zero-free classroom to help students grow rather than get into that no mindset. I really appreciate your support. Thank you so much. This has been so valuable.
So while Morgan's adjusting that, just the delay with video and audio is something we're all going to be dealing with low bandwidth issues. I just want to point that out, that can be a problem. I don't know if everyone else had that same voice and video delay that I did. But Morgan, are you ready?
Yes. First of all, thank you, Stephanie. That's so impressive to see how we took all our individual videos and uploaded them. What a great method of demonstrating learning for lots of different people. So I'd like to open up and first of all give the commissioner and the commissioner's team an opportunity to respond or to ask questions about what you heard, what these teachers have learned and what they're willing to commit to in the upcoming year.
Wow. So I wrote wow. Took me a while. I think my first thought is, Morgan, you've mentioned this to me. You've sent me links. You've kept me in the loop. I've thought to myself, this sounds like a great idea. I'm in favor of this idea. But then to hear from all of these passionate, dedicated, forward-thinking educators, like, I actually have goosebumps through the whole thing. Like, I'm so excited. And when you say revolution, it feels like this could be a beginning of a groundswell of understanding. And I guess a few of my initial thoughts are, I love hearing redemption, give students hope, like keeping, and I also think way down the line, if you look at how I'm big on equity in general, and at the end of the day, our outcomes, not as just a school system, just societally, the opportunities, the whole bootstrap mentality that anybody can just start with nothing and find their way to greatness, when we really follow the trajectory of anybody who is a little bit different, who's born into circumstances that maybe weren't conducive, somebody who's less competitive. And when I think about what motivates a lot of people, what motivates me, in fact, it's like we are motivated when we're successful. My story is I was once a waitress, and I was the worst waitress on the planet. There was like once a thing on Friends where Phoebe had a sister or somebody was the worst waitress. I was worse than that. I mean, it wasn't even funny to me because that was how bad I was. And I know what it's like to show up every day to a job that you're just not good at, and you don't do it for very long, and eventually you just check out. And giving kids these opportunities for success, which will, I think, create the motivation that some of us are, you know, in general, education looks for motivation coming through the door. You know, we need a motivated student, but obviously, for those who are not coming in pre-motivated, they do need this kind of thing. And I'm so, I guess, grateful, and I am in awe to know how much you've all been going through as educators. Can we just talk about the pandemic briefly? Like, you guys have gone through a full-on wholesale change in your practice. You are facing absolutely unknowable conditions going into the fall, and I know that, and we are working so hard to make sure that schools don't open until everybody is ready to do so safely. And then again, we also want schools to open, again, for the sake of equity, because you know the kids who are languishing right now in deep need of being with you in person. And I guess you're going through so many things right now, and to think that you've taken the time to engage in this level of, you know, introspection and professional growth, and that you're going to be the people who inspire your colleagues and peers around this. I'm deeply grateful and in awe of what you have pulled off here. It's just wonderful. So thank you. Oh, and I do have a question. How will you, how does this sit with your peers and your colleagues? I know what it's like. It's been like for me. I've often advocated for equity, particularly around grading. And there are some folks who believe that you got to hold a standard and hold everybody to the standard, and they get what they get, and you don't make it too easy. And if everybody passes, then everybody. How do you convince or work with, or at least absorb any of the, if you get any negativity or doubt from your colleagues?
I'd be happy to start with that, but then someone else to jump in too. So I'm Patty Forster, and I teach at Camden High School. And I started questioning grading and talking to a few colleagues probably 5 years ago. And that was as far as I could get, because teachers have this like really tight web of belief about grading practices, and nobody wanted to question them. So I just worked on it by myself. And then eventually I got a new principal who's awesome. And he and I started to have conversations about grading. And with that extra leadership with administration, that's now trickling down to staff. And so he started to talk about grading with staff and having conversations. He and I shared this book that we studied, The Grading for Equity. He listened to your words, do no harm. And he stood up and said to these teachers who didn't want to change, you have to. You got to do it, because it's not okay right now. And from there, we've been able to move forward. And now I've done a staff presentation on grading. We'll do it again going into the school year, because people need reminders. And more teachers now are open and talking about it. Not all of them, but many. Somebody else want to speak to their school experience? You have to unmute and just jump in.
I just want to say, I'm sorry, I read what Amanda wrote and not feeling heard. And then I heard what you said about it, having a school leader who was amenable to this idea and who would bring it forward. And I've been working with MPA, the Maine Principals Association, on ways of renewing their professional development that's offered to school and district leaders. And maybe there's a way for us to support this by asking MPA to engage people in this conversation, so that the actual building leaders would help to create a more more fertile ground for this type of work. So maybe that would be something that could help.
Absolutely, and I would get them looking at that book.
I think there are two distinct experiences I'd like people to weigh in on. There were some folks who commented that the way that we did this and we broke out into small groups meant that people from around the state were working with people from outside their schools. And so they were able to do this learning collaboratively with people they otherwise never would have worked with. And that's been one of my goals for years, is trying to, connect people who are really on their own with other like-minded individuals. So maybe that's one way of talking about how your peers responded and the peers that you're meeting and working with and what you're experiencing. And the other thing is there are some folks who participated in this intentionally as a group, who formed some school group. So I think Kate Strowman has unmuted. Do you want to weigh in, Kate?
Well, yes. Hi, I'm Kate Strowman, and I teach at Skowhegan Area Middle School. And I just would add that I think that type of leadership, that type of brave leadership that Patty described is really unusual and wonderful. We have a terrific principal at our school as well. I think a lot of this conversation happens at our school in our PLC. And so I would suggest if any school doesn't have that sort of thing, that they try to initiate something like that. Our district has been willing to offer a small stipend for that. And I think when you build consensus among your peers and then share it together, it's safer than doing it on your own. And it's also a way to preserve your relationships, which I still think is really paramount in the profession.
Yeah.
Stephanie?
Yeah, can I just jump in though, because while I am fortunate enough to have participated in this group with 2 of my 13 colleagues from my department, when I offered to share my notes from the book study and encouraged my colleagues in a department meeting to think about grading for content rather than compliance, my department chair said that I needed to stop attacking people. And it was a very uncomfortable conversation. And there in my building is no leadership support from the department level. We don't have PLCs or PLGs that meet regularly or are able to affect change. And we don't have building leadership either. So for those teachers who are in a context like mine, think about how you can control what you can control. Like, do the things and be the change in your classroom for your students, because school needs to be a place of healing for them. And I think that, I hope that if people in my context see the change that I'm able to affect, that will hopefully ripple out. But Morgan, I want to echo what you said, just how important it is for teachers who are in contexts like mine to be in communities like this, because otherwise it is so incredibly isolating when you do lack the kind of support that I think some folks are fortunate enough to have.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak to that?
Could I jump in? I was fortunate enough, I work in a very traditionally structured school, traditional grading practices, and I did have colleagues in my group and also colleagues from another school, and we kind of banded together by knowing each other professionally and also as friends to work together for this book group. But I do want to say that we really struggled in my school when we went into emergency distance learning in the spring, when we started having conversations as a whole school about grading, and that idea of not taking off points for late work, the idea of not giving zeros, the idea of separating out, behaviors or things of that nature from the grade itself. Those were conversations that I found my colleagues were incredibly resistant to, kind of like Stephanie is saying. And I think one of the issues is that teachers really see their grading practices as part of their teacher self. And they're very committed to those practices. But what I thought was very interesting while I was reading this book is that no one had ever sat down with me. I've been teaching for 13 years. No one has ever sat down with me and talked to me about how and why we grade. And people, I think, just tend to use whatever traditional practices they've seen in the past. And so that's where that kind of perpetual cycle of bad, ineffective, and inequitable grading practices come from. I'd really love to see, everybody, I think, took an assessment class when they were in college. And I think it's very strange to think that we don't have these conversations in our pre-service teacher work. I think that this is the kind of textbook that could really ground some of those conversations if everybody coming out of their teacher prep programs in the state had a better understanding of the logistics of grading practices, not just what statistical knowledge is in education, which is what I really felt like that assessment class focused on. And I do think that we need more training for administrators. Some people like Patty are blessed with administrators who are open-minded and willing to support teachers in these kind of grassroots movements. Stephanie has explained that she has a principal and department leadership that's not interested in that. And I agree that we can be the change individually, and I think a lot of us are really committed to doing that. But I also think there needs to be something systematically built in as well that starts addressing these inequalities, because I don't think that teachers want to do these types of things to their students, and I don't think they want to be inequitable or cause harm to their students, but I also don't think that they know that these practices are kind of killing that hope and killing that success for their students. So whatever support we can receive, I think at a larger level would be beneficial.
Can I just jump in for a second?
Please.
This is Kim Barnes, and I teach, at what will be the new Caribou Community School that's being built right now. Very exciting. But if I can just jump off of what Renee just said, my group looked at accuracy from a middle school lens, and we talked a lot about the support that teachers would need to move forward with this, and to talk about the how and why we grade. And rather than offer professional development, we need to be offering professional learning communities. And there is a difference between the two. And schools need instructional coaches to lead this and to organize it. And not all schools have access to that. My school does not. My district does not. We just don't have the, how things are funded. We just don't have that as an option. But for things to move forward, if there were instructional coaches in every school, in every district, then I think we could start seeing some of that forward momentum, because there would be someone in charge of organizing and kind of spreading that out. So we talked a lot about that in our group, and it's that instructional coaches in every district are important.
Brilliant. Carrie, did you want to say something? Carrie Barbosa?
Hi there. I teach in South Portland, and I think something that goes along with what the last two people have been talking about, and I just have to mention, is local control. And the reason I'm saying this is many of the practices that were outlined in this book are all things that we were doing at my school while we were using standards-based grading. And I also have worked under two pretty innovative leaders in the past, like even as much as 10 years ago, who were doing a lot of these things. So anyway, we were doing these practices during standards-based grading, and then there was a strong group of parents who were very vocal and very much against this grading system. And they went at the school board very hard again and again and again, and eventually tore the system down. And then we went right back to 0 to 100 and everything, all classic 1970s style. And then when we went to emergency remote learning, and I was fighting personally for pass-fail or pass not enough evidence, this same group of parents came forward in that same fashion and pretty much swayed the school board to go with just the traditional grading that we had been doing. And it's two people in particular, and they really represent only a very tiny portion of our population in South Portland. And unfortunately, the kids who were most disadvantaged in this situation ended up being hurt. And I find sometimes that the hard work that we do and the causes that we fight for, you know, in the end, they get destroyed because of, you know, just say it, local control and the system of school board and public comment. And I'm nervous saying that, but I really felt like I needed to say that. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Carrie.
I watched the video of the school board meetings where that all was happening, by the way, Carrie. It is really awful. And I think in general, there's a whole swath of families, and it's really the families, I think, more than the students, who are highly competitive, and they want everybody to be ranked and sorted, like, so that they can show how their top 10, you know, child is as compared to peers. And, you know, people crave that bell curve. And why is my A plus good if there isn't somebody with an F somewhere? Like, it doesn't make sense to them. And you're also fighting what I've fought these battles my entire career too. I've always been in education after waitressing. And I guess it's maddening, because you're right, you can take 10 steps forward, you can get energy and momentum going, and there are political forces, there are structural forces. You mentioned the local control. Local control and equity can't even mix. It's not a thing. If you have local control, you already have a death knell for equity in a big sense. The unfortunate piece here is local control is baked into Maine's constitution. It's at our constitutional level where we have to have local control. Vermont, it says the state is responsible for making suitable provision for the education of kids, for example. But here in Maine, it's the several municipalities, and that does set us up. And it depends who's on your school board. It depends which administrators move through because administrators are so much more mobile than educators are, and it can just change your whole culture like a pendulum. And so I guess what I'm saying is I feel and understand and have experienced what you're describing. And I'm looking for really, I think we have some opportunity right now, because nobody is confident that what we're about to face together is going to go particularly well or is going to be successful. Nobody knows exactly how to do what's going to happen next, because it hasn't been done before. And what we have here in Maine is we do have one opportunity that I keep coming back to, and that is we got a highly competitive grant from the USED. It's close to $17 million, and that grant will pay for educator and school leader and even paraprofessional training and learning experiences in innovation engineering, design thinking, like all of those types of things, basically helping. Not that anybody, I know people are so exhausted already, and we're gonna say, hey, you can do more PD, but this is like for like actual certifications in innovation engineering, which I think every teacher ought to be. I feel like the answer to local control, to pendulum swinging leadership at the school board and administrative level has to be strong, empowered, innovative teachers who can, if you can pull this groundswell together and like share this video. I want to share this video everywhere. I want it on our website if it's not there. But just even if there's a way to enlist some of you through, all of you should be considering at least getting involved, because here's the other thing. In addition to the professional development, there's, and Paige is here. Paige Nichols, if you want to wave, like that's Paige. She and her innovation team at the department will be running this. And soon, people who want to suggest a pilot project that either reimagines, redefines, or enhances remote learning in particular. It is about remote learning. but in the event that, I mean, I think remote learning is one of those things that would drive people to really look at equity of grading practices, because kids have such inequitable circumstances under which they'll be learning in a remote situation, or a hybrid for that matter. Maybe I just keep thinking there might be a huge opportunity here. The grant will pay a ton of money toward what needs to happen to get, you know, whether it's everybody gets this book, or you know, consulting, or whatever structures it might take. And maybe it is, I'm hearing learning coaches, you know, maybe the model involves learning coaches in schools, and that could be a thing that was covered. Like, there's more to come. We just learned we got the grant. We were one of only, I think, 11 states to have been awarded it. And we're very excited, and there's so much more coming, but keep your ear to the ground, and Morgan will keep you in the loop, because there's some way to utilize that, I think, to build like the strength that educator voice needs, and to have you, when there is a void of leadership, leadership comes in and takes over. When there is solid, rock solid, like steady, ongoing leadership in the field, I think, among educators, a great leader could come in and just continue to support that, you know? And so I feel like, I know you have a lot of structures against you as educators to be organized, to be strong, to sustain your peers' disdain because they don't, I mean, and there's like fear-based, like clinging to the way things have always gone. And then the external world, everybody has gone to school, and therefore everybody is an expert on how it ought to be done. So the world thinks here's what school is, and they keep trying to put you back in that box every time you try to move out of it. And as long as we're in this administration, we're going to fight so hard against that. And we have amazing people like Morgan who'll be long-term with the department, and who'll keep moving forward. But while we have these tiny opportunities that have been born out of strife and mayhem, we want to make sure people like you all are engaged and aware of those opportunities. So here they come. If you want to ask Paige any questions about it, or connect with her later, or she can throw her email direct up to you so you can stay in the loop on that grant opportunity. Thank you for letting me go off on a diatribe.
No, I don't know about everyone else in this room, but I think I've just fallen in love with you. You speak so well and powerfully about these issues that matter to us too. And just so you know, when you look around this room, people multiply that by the number of educators who have spent their entire summers learning. This has been my busiest summer ever. All I am doing is learning. So teachers aren't afraid of more PD, more work, because we want to be the best we can be for our students. Anyone else want to speak, or do you have another? Oh, I see Marilee.
I've been teaching at Bristol Consolidated School, and one of the other pieces that this book has drawn the interest of my administrator was the equity piece, and the touching into that what our country's already going through within equity. And even though in Bristol it's not as maybe as a big a deal as it is in the big cities, it's still, there's inequity. And so there was this little piece that my administrator caught a hold of and said, and bought the books. So there was another piece of our culture that this book actually tapped into that I'm hoping will then get into the grading piece, that there are some who have conflicts with it, but they don't have conflicts with the equity piece. So it's a real positive.
I think that was one of the reasons we encouraged people to choose a pillar and to focus on a practice. You know, you've got to get comfortable with something, with change to begin with. And so instead of saying do this or go there or all of this, choosing something that maybe speaks to your heart or speaks to your current need was really important for this project.
Mary, was that a little finger up? I want to say something. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Patty. I think this has already been said, and I hesitate to speak after Morgan just now and the commissioner, but I just want to underline two things. Change is really hard, and you all have dived in, as English teachers, you've dived in, other teachers. and been willing to do the work, read the book, do the reading group on top of everything else you've been doing to figure out what change would work on behalf of our students. And I just want to recognize the difficult work that you've done. And I've really loved listening to all of you. I really have. This has been, thank you for inviting me, Morgan.
I'll tell you, when I saw the first 4 or 5 videos that teachers posted to our folder as we were getting ready to do the video montage, they made me weep. And I'm not, a kind of weepy, teary person, but hearing teachers speak from their heart about the changes they felt they needed to make in order to really and truly support their students was very emotional and very inspiring. And so I see lots of potential and connections for innovation and for the innovative projects. And I'm hoping to that everyone here is inspired, and that everyone, in fact, who couldn't be here today but did participate in this study will continue to think, as Commissioner Macon challenged us to look for those ways. I just want to hear, is there someone maybe as we wrap this up?
Yes, Michelle.
Someone
has her hand up.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, I really think we need to find a way. Teachers are really stressed right now with everything that they have on their plate, to make them realize that changing their grading practices is not another big whole thing that they have to do. It actually is integrated and can be easily brought into the system, and to actually help them to save time and energy and stress, and that it's not viewed as another thing on the plate, that it's viewed that it's actually taking things off the plate and a lot of stress for teachers. So we need to find a way to kind of market it so that teachers don't feel like, oh my God, now I have to do grading too. Like, it's really not about that. It integrates with a lot of the SEL work that we're doing and everything else. And teachers, I think, would love not feeling the pressure to grade every single paper. So I think we just need to figure out how we can market it to teachers to do that.
Such a good point. Teachers complain more about grading than anything else, and yet they could grade differently and focus on learning.
There were a few places where entire departments have embraced the grading equity study, or maybe a couple of people who convinced their principals, their school leadership. Does anybody want to weigh in on how that happened? I don't know if anyone is here today who had that experience.
Yeah, Tiff Shaw, Winthrop High School, my whole department, English department, did the study together this summer. And it's cool because 2 of us have been at the school and 2 are brand new to our school. One was a student teacher who worked with me all through the pandemic this spring. And one we just hired over the summer, and she wanted to get on board and do this with us. And we'll be honest, we didn't get to dive into it as much as we wanted to because of schedules, but we plan to continue studying the book together over the course of this coming year and working as a department to try to institute some practices as a team, and hopefully from that grow out. Our principal is on board. Some of us were able to get the book through the Department of Ed, and we thank you for that for free. One of our members wasn't able to, but our principal paid for her book. So he's supportive even at that level, which sometimes is even difficult to find the money, as we all know, to even purchase a book for a study. So we have that support from him to continue to have these conversations. And I think he's open to chatting with us once we get back in school this fall about what we can do to maybe bring some of these ideas forward to the rest of the staff. But for the time being, the 4 of us in our English department are going to continue to really dive into this together and to try to find some ways that as a team we can role model better ways to do things.
Thank you, Tiff. I want to mention that in that emergency, like we've suddenly got this little pot of Title II money to address COVID issues. I grabbed on. I asked for money to buy 50 copies and then hoped I could get 50 teachers who'd be willing to do this text study. Well, I sent out the message that the first 50 people to register would get this book for free, and it took it was less than 48 hours before I was up to about 52. So, you know, that is an important point, getting the book. Of course, then I had to scramble to get in and meet the postal delivery and turn the books around to get them out in time. But hey, you know, it's completely worth it. So being able to buy the books that weren't terribly expensive, but getting them into teachers' hands was just a little bit of a catalyst that helped this all come together. So not a huge financial investment, but it really was. It made a big deal.
Teachers love free books.
Especially English teachers.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank everybody for being here today, and especially Commissioner Macon and her leadership and innovation team, because I felt like in order for us to keep thinking about what we might possibly do next, and I will tell you one of the things that I think should happen is that we should have another round of this study to introduce more people, maybe starting in October, so we can do this study with more folks. But for all the folks who have already done this study, we want to look for ways to keep moving this forward and to look for more systemic connections. So I appreciate having this opportunity to talk and think today and look for what our next steps might possibly be. I see there's incredible conversation going on in the chat, so I hate to bring things to a close while there's still all this great chat stuff happening. Great. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming here. Thank you for your continued good work. Anything you need in the coming year, please let me know. You know, best of luck. I know lots of is happening in the next few weeks, and we're definitely here to help. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.